In Baldur's Gate 3, the Druids will massacre the Tiefling refugees and seal off the grove if you make them angry. But what happens if you incite the massacre, keep one member of your party hidden inside the grove, and then rescue their leader Halsin? Will Big Papa Halsin teach those naughty little Druids a lesson, or will it be too late for peace? This video will answer that and several other questions I have about the Druids via a series of experiments, with the majority focused on everyone's least favorite Druid, Kagha. So with that said, let's dive in. The first encounter you're likely to have with Kagha is shortly after you enter the Druid Grove in Act 1. Kagha is in charge of the grove because the real leader, the Archdruid Halsin, has been kidnapped by goblins. Only Kagha is a pretty bad replacement because, much like Margaret Thatcher, her version of girl bossing involves a lot of murder.
Do you think Margaret Thatcher had girl power?
Yes, of course.
Do you think she effectively utilized girl power by funneling money to illegal paramilitary death squads in Northern Ireland?
I don't know about that.
Although, to be fair, Halsin doesn't seem like the best leader either, mostly because he doesn't seem to want to be a leader, or to even live inside the grove, as he prefers to spend his free time wandering Faerun, exploring nature's, bounties. But even a horny, proudly polyamorous bear is a better choice than Kagha when it comes to leading the Druids. And just to make sure we as players understand this, the first time we encounter Kagha is this scene right here, where she attempts to imprison an elementary school-aged child for trying to steal a fancy statue.
Please. I'm sorry.
This is madness, Kagha. She's just a...
A what, Wrath? A thief? A poison? A threat? I will imprison the devil. And I will cast out every stranger. Wrath, lock her up. She remains here until the rite is complete. And keep still, devil. Tila is restless.
Come, Kagha. We took back the idol. Surely...
Do it. Now, Wrath.
No.
Ithias! Tila, to me!
Gone. By the gods, Kagha, what have you done?
Bury the remains. Continue the rite.
Now, you can save Arabella fairly easily via dialogue checks, but I wanted to see if I could stop this encounter from happening in the first place. So let's do the time warp and ask our first question. What happens if we kill Kagha before she kills Arabella?
Cast out the beast. She may join us. Let the devil be an example. We will tolerate outlanders no longer. The outlander has betrayed us. I should have known. Druids, we cannot compromise any longer.
Now, that went poorly. Not only did Kagha start a fight with me, that little cutscene we saw meant that she also ordered the other Druids to go massacre the Tieflings. But perhaps that was my fault for targeting the wrong person. After all, Kagha doesn't actually kill Arabella. Technically, that's her snake, Tila. Which got me thinking, what happens if we kill Tila, Kagha's snake, before it kills Arabella?
I'll be fine. She may join them.
By
Let
my
the devil
hand.
be an example. No longer. The outlander has betrayed us.
Now, I realized at this point I was taking the wrong approach. Kagha is willing to slaughter dozens of innocents over much smaller slights. So of course she'd attack us if we hurt someone precious to her. So instead of trying to hurt Kagha or her allies, I want to know, what happens if you kill Arabella before Kagha has the opportunity?
Shadow.
She stole the idol of Sylvanas. She must pay the price. We will imprison her forever. The outlander has betrayed us. I should have known.
Okay, how does that make any sense? Like, why would you murder all the Tieflings because someone else murdered a Tiefling? They're both Tieflings. It just... Kagha sucks. All right. After these first few experiments, it's clear that Arabella is destined to die, if, you make no effort at all to save her. So let's shift gears and focus our next few experiments on the dead Arabella. Now, waiting just outside are Arabella's parents, and because I'm a good Samaritan, my next question is, what happens if you drag Arabella's dead body over to her parents? The rest of my party was too puny for the job, so Lae'zel is the star of this mission. First step, pick up Arabella's dead body and deposit her into my inventory. Easy.
Witnessed interfering with a dead body. The alarm is being raised. Your wanton criminality is attracting attention. Perhaps you should diffuse the situation before things turn ugly. They believe you. For now.
Okay, and now let's head over to Arabella's parents. This was actually one of the hardest experiments for me because at first, I tried to drag and drop Arabella to her parents using improvised melee weapon, but the door was being pretty damn rude. So then I tried to teleport her to the waypoint, but I couldn't figure out how to bring her with me. It was all very sad, but not as sad as Arabella's parents are about to be. So being very careful not to piss off the guards again, let's do this thing.
My little girl is dead! You were there! Why didn't you stop it? You bastard! Get away! Get away from me!
Get away. All Arabella wanted to do is help. But you and half the grove stood by and let her die. Alone. Get out of my sight. For your own good.
Okay, not gonna lie, I'm a little shocked that worked. So hats off to you, Larian. But I'm also very curious to see if Arabella's parents had a less intense reaction if we break the news to them in a less demented way. So let's reset and try that out.
Unless you have news of Arabella, I don't want to hear it. Wait, what?
What are you saying?
Don't be ridiculous. What are you on about?
Now, I was planning on being honest with Arabella's parents, but I think it's absolutely hilarious that you can choose this option, so let's try that first.
Are you having a laugh? Is this funny to you?
Hang on, love. This will be over soon enough. We just gotta wait a bit longer. Thank you. Sincerely. I don't know what we'd do without our little girl.
Iconic. Beautiful. Well worth it.
She's not.
But now let's go back and actually tell her parents what happened.
Kagha. Kagha did. What?
No. No! That snake! That... Ah!
Okay, while Arabella's parents grieve, we're gonna go rescue Halsin from the goblin camp. And this is because while Arabella has died on a few of my playthroughs, I've never actually let her die and then told her parents what happened and also kept Kagha alive. And apparently that can make all the difference come the Tiefling party. Now, I did have to rescue Halsin from the goblins like 5 different times for this experiment video, only a few of which are shown, and while that took me like 7 hours total, please enjoy this tiny montage.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play love and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
And victory.
You did it. You actually did it. The leader's dead. Praise Sylvanus.
Now let's go back to the grove.
I'd have let the goblins take me if it meant Arabella lived. Why even fight?
One sorrow ended, the next soon to begin.
And although I'm mostly interested in what happens between Kagha and Arabella's parents, let's take a very brief detour to ask, what does Halsin do if he comes back and finds out Kagha has killed Arabella?
You took it upon yourself to undertake the rite of thorns? To spill blood in this sacred place? It would have been easier if you just died, Kagha. Now I have to hear excuses instead.
I owe you nothing. Goblins swarmed us like roaches while you stumbled after the past. You chose to abandon us. I chose to protect us.
Silence! The rite has been ended. I was going to show leniency. But Kagha, a child is dead because of you.
A thief is dead. She stole the idol, befouled the grove.
Enough! If anyone befouled this place, it is you. By sowing division, hatred, death. As for the idol, it's nothing compared to a life. A mere object next to one of nature's creations. You show no pity, no remorse. I cannot absolve you. Nature will determine your fate. Whatever happens to you next, know that it is the Oak Father's will. Now get out of my sight. There is nothing more to be said.
Okay, neat. But let's get back on track and head over to the party.
Did you think we'd let you go? Let you walk away? I buried my daughter because of you! I'm going nowhere.
Your daughter roused the nest. Did you expect the viper not to strike? I will bear no more accusations. Leave me!
Tell me, how's the wine?
The wine? What did you...
You fell victim to one of the classic blunders. The most famous is never get involved in a land war in Asia, but only slightly less well known is this: never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
I want you to feel small. I want you to feel helpless, just like her. Her name was Arabella. Picture her! How scared she was. And no, this will hurt. As if I'd let her draw breath. Come on, Locke. We're done. I did what I had to do, and I won't hear a word about it from you or anyone else.
So much blood and death. If we ever meet again, I hope it's under better circumstances.
This scene gave me so much joy just because it's a good chunk of content that I've never seen before. But I do have just a few tiny, very basic follow-up questions. My first one is simply, what happens if you kill Chimera after she kills Kagha?
Seems your actions have earned you an enemy. And a fight.
Alright, a couple of guards aggro on us, but this isn't a terrible situation. Plus, I have backup, so let me just call on Astarion for a bit of help and... Oh. Oh no. I guess I deserve that. But for the sake of justice, I feel like I also have to ask the question the other way around too. So let's ask, what happens if we kill Kagha before Chimera has a chance to poison her?
Right. Time to scout them out.
Pick a fight. The consequences are hardly surprising.
And now let's see what Chimera has to say.
Why didn't the goblins end me? Why did I survive and my little girl didn't? Damn it!
I wanted to find Arabella's dad to see if he had any unique dialogue lines, but I searched all over camp and couldn't find him. So looks like Chimera's day just got even worse. Anywho, I have one last question here, and that's, does anything cool happen if we convince Chimera not to kill Kagha and then secretly finish the job afterwards?
I want you to feel small. I want you to feel helpless, just like her. Her name was Arabella. Picture her. How scared she was. And no, this will hurt. She murdered my daughter. You make a good point. Remember this moment. Remember Arabella's cold, dead body and live with the blood of an innocent child on your hands. Ugh! Let's go before I change my mind.
That was a hard thing to do.
Here's hoping I don't regret it.
Your behavior has caused upset. Now a fight is unavoidable.
Damn it, Will, stay out of this. It took a pathetically long time for Will and I to finish fighting, but afterwards I talked to Chimera and she definitely doesn't realize what I've done.
I'm torn between thanking you and telling you to bugger off. But I will say this. I'm grateful not to have blood on my hands.
Thank you for intervening with Kagha. Don't know if she deserved the mercy, but I hope something good comes of it.
Now, you might have noticed that while trying out this batch of experiments, we incited a lot of massacres in the Druid Grove, and I had a few questions about that. Namely, does anything cool happen if you manage to protect the Tieflings from the Druids? So let's start another riot. I'm going to have Lae'zel steal the Idol Sylvanas this time around, both for a change of scenery, and also because we get to see the falling cutscene.
The Outlander serves Zevlor! The time has come. Remove the outsiders!
Alright, with that harrowing scene to motivate us, let's beat up some druids. And if you do end up purposely fighting the druids on a playthrough, then this is actually a pretty good place to start the battle because it allows you to take on the majority of the druids before they corner the tieflings, as opposed to when you trigger the fight while inside Kagha's sanctuary. And now that we've defeated all the druids we can see, let's go see if anything cool happens, like being complimented by a tiefling. And as we are on our way to do that, I have two very tiny but noticeable differences that I found after completing this battle here versus the times when I started it by hurting Kagha in her den. And number one is that Silver is alive and not hostile.
Master says you're good. Told me to protect you. But one wrong move, and your flesh is mine.
And two, Wrath apparently fought on the side of the tiefling since he's also still around and not hostile.
We've won, yes. But at what cost? The peace of this grove has been shattered forever.
Anyways, after fighting, I wanted to see what the tieflings had to say to me. And in the process, I soaked up a fair amount of praise.
That's twice you saved us now. Thank you. You bought enough time for the little ones to hide.
You stood by us. I thought you might. Glad I was right. You might even hang around and help us deal with goblins by my reckoning.
And afterwards, I headed inside Zevlor's lair where most of the tieflings were gathered and spoke to a few people inside. This was all fairly standard, and I probably wouldn't have included this clip if not for what happens next when I decide to climb up this ladder over here. Somehow, despite clocking a couple hundred hours in this game, I've never taken this route, and I've definitely never ever seen this NPC over here. So I actually made a tiny separate video about this whole encounter, which, if I'm doing this right, you should be able to click on right about now. Anyways, a couple of the comments on that video let me know that this NPC, Nurella, only shows up if Lacrissa dies. She's basically a replacement NPC, and she actually does have voice lines. She was just bugging out when I found her, I guess. But it wasn't until I was editing this video that I realized, wait a minute, Lacrissa is still alive in this timeline. And look y'all, my timeline is messy for this video, so at first I thought I was just mix and matching two separate experiments, but as you can see here, it's all one continuous video. Here is me right after the fight talking to Lacrissa, and here is where I find Nurella right after. Weird. But I often overlook things, so if anyone has an explanation for this, please let me know in the comments. Until then, this mystery remains unsolved. Anywho, speaking of replacement NPCs, While Zevlor and most of the Tieflings survive this time around, my next question is simple. What happens if Zevlor dies during the Druid massacre? To test this out, I'm going to start the fight in Kagha's quarters so the Druids get a head start on hacking up those poor Tieflings. And after finishing up here, I'll go and try not to die myself in this here fight. This fight took forever. Part of me feels like I'm still fighting it, but at least I'm free, I'm finally done, and so I'm just gonna go mosey on after this dude over here and oh shit, they're rolling for initiative. That's not good, and oh god, no, we'll just burst into flames. Okay, well, that was unfortunate, but let's keep at it, I suppose.
Listen. You're a vile blister. I shall trick you.
I can't believe they turned on us. Well, I suppose I can, but there are children here. I thought Druids valued life. Shows what I know. Oh, we'd best prepare for the worst. If more goblins come now, we won't stand a chance. Out of the cookpan.
I think it's so cool that Zevlor has a clear replacement. But what about the other Tieflings? Like, usually once you beat the goblins, you get to celebrate with a fun, festive night at camp with the Tieflings. So my next question is, if most of the Tieflings die in the Druid massacre, will the goblin party be a total drag? Alright, so I'm going to rescue Halsin again right now. And while I've been skipping these scenes for brevity's sake, I do want to pause here right after letting Halsin out of his cage to ask a brief detour question. What happens if you tell Halsin you murdered all the Druids while you're rescuing him?
I've no right to ask more of you, but if you could help me, I'd be free to join your journey to Moonrise. I cannot allow these butchers to threaten my grove. The natural order must be protected.
Also, I'm going to make a save file here so we can see what happens if we try and appease him versus when we act all tough.
What? How? Why? Explain yourself at once! Then it is as you say. They forgot their principles. You had no choice. I will mourn them when I can. But there are other matters to attend to before that. I've no right to ask more of you. But if you could help me, I'd be free to join your journey to Moonrise. I cannot allow these butchers to threaten my grove. The natural order must be protected. What? How? Why? Explain yourself at once! You rabid dog! Murderer! Those were the servants of Sylvanas! Nature's guardians! You will not see another day.
Okay, I mean, I think his reaction is pretty understandable even if the Druids are assholes. But anyways, let's bounce forward in time. I've gone ahead and finished rescuing Halsin, and now we're on our way back to the grove to chat with him before we head over to the party. Ah, but look who is waiting for us up ahead.
We've just got word. The goblins have cleared out, and I hear it's you we have to thank. Here. It's not much, but it's yours. Zevlor ordered a collection before he passed. But the time for mourning is done. I mean to celebrate. My people would be honored to join your camp tonight if you'll have us. We're ready to go when you are. Though, you might want to speak to Halsin first. He turned up a short while ago.
Alright, now that we've spoken to Zevlor's replacement, we can go ahead and head to the party. And to answer the last question, the party is not a drag. There are a bunch of NPCs who replace the Tieflings that are usually at this party, and I don't know about you, but I like some of them better than the originals. Like, look how much fun they are.
Grab a drink! I'm fairly certain it's all yours anyway.
We can worry about the road tomorrow. Tonight we drink.
Let's dance! Show me!
Amazing! Anywho, in the past 2 experiments, we managed to save at least some of the Tieflings while defeating the Druids. However, if you incite the massacre but don't manage to beat the Druids, they'll kill everyone inside and then seal off the grove. Which leads me to my last question of today's episode. What happens if we trigger the massacre inside the grove, but instead of battling the Druids, we leave one party member inside the grove, rescue Halsin, defeat the goblin leaders, and then come back before the ritual is completed?
Another fight. Let's go.
Okie dokie. We've just finished hacking up Kagha after inciting the massacre inside the grove, and now we're ready to sneak out. Only I know from previous experiences that if the massacre starts and your party leaves the grove, they'll seal as soon as you're out of seeing distance. So instead of taking on the goblin camp with a full party, I'm going to have Gale hide inside the grove the whole time. I wasn't sure where to have Gale hide, but the beach over here looked pretty empty, so I headed that way. Only to get a little interrupted.
My, what manner of place is this? A path to redemption? Or a road to damnation? Hard to say, for your journey is just beginning. What would suit the occasion? The words to a lullaby, perhaps. The mouse smiled brightly. It outfoxed the cat. Then down came the claw. And that, love, was that. They do know how to write them in Cormier, don't they? Well met, I am Raphael. Very much at your service. Why, I never. You're paranoid, aren't you? Must be the surroundings. Rather bleak and lonesome. One feels so exposed. This quaint little scene is decidedly too middle of nowhere for my tastes. Come.
I could just skip to this cutscene, but I thought that maybe this would actually be the perfect place for Gale to hide. Only, despite technically being with Raphael, Gale's body remained on the beach when I switched back inside my tab. Thinking perhaps he was a hologram, I took the opportunity to shove him. Alas, he was still physical. Anyways, I left Gale on the beach, hiding in plain sight, and trekked this way, looking for any shortcuts or good hiding places. But when I heard a hauntingly familiar melody, I realized with horror that Murkon was still hanging out with the harpies.
Shh! Listen. Don't you hear it? It's so peaceful. No, it's just a bit of water. I only want to listen. Just a little closer. Yes, everything's gonna be fine once I get there.
So while we are on a mission, I feel that it's my duty to take a detour and ask, will Murkon have any cool new lines if we save him in the middle of the druid attack?
Are they gone? Who are you?
I'm your worst nightmare.
Wow. I'm Murkon. Oh no. I had to get the gold from the nest. Mole will be so mad. I got to go. Wait, you should meet Mole. She'll be grateful you helped me.
The answer to our question was a solid no. But seeing Murkon made me realize I hadn't seen any of the other Tiefling kids during the fighting. So let's follow up our little detour with another detour and ask, so what's going on with the Tiefling kids during the druid attack? To find out, we're just going to practice some light sneaking and make our way over to this hole. And this might have been an intuitive find for anyone who incited the massacre, but I'm going to answer the question anyways because 1, it never crossed my mind personally, and 2, judging from some of the comments on my last videos, a lot of you out there have never even pissed off the druids in the first place. And luckily the kids are still down here, but they're pretty traumatized.
I knew they wanted us dead. I knew it. They're supposed to be our friends. Don't let them get us.
Hiding with the children, huh? I get it.
And I know I was supposed to leave and save Halsin, but I actually couldn't force myself to do it in this playthrough. I fought the druids and almost killed my entire party in the process. In fact, I would have died entirely except in my last hour, I brought Gale back in to bring the pain.
I'm talking poisonous necrotic effect.
Can't stay idle. Time to press ahead.
Afterwards, we all went back down to the hole to reassure the children that they were safe. Except that they had all abandoned us. And, oh god, wait. Were those bloodstains always there? Yikes. Anyways, let's reset and actually rescue Halsin this time. Okay, so this time I've incited the massacre, kept Gale hidden inside the grove, and rescued Halsin, and now let's finish off the last goblin fight.
You did it! You actually did it! The leader's dead! Praise Sylvanus. No, that's not right. Praise you, my friend. The Grove owes you a debt beyond measure. Killing's never my first choice, but those 3 were too dangerous to leave alive. Let's get out of this pit, firstly. Return to the Grove. I'll make my own way there. I can see to some matters there, and we can discuss what comes next amidst more bucolic surroundings than here.
All right, and here is where this experiment's downfall begins. Halsin told us to go meet him in the grove, so let's do that, I guess. Only where are you, Halsin? Don't tell me you're just gonna flake out the first time you see a problem. This is your grove, this is your problem. So next step, I went and checked on Gale, who was doing a great job at hiding. And while I was hoping beyond hopes that Halsin would be able to make his way here mid-fight, I decided to be brave, reunite my party, and take care of this fight without him. And might I mention that it's very considerate that the druids waited to slaughter everyone until we came back. #blessed. In any case, I'm going to skip most of this fight because it was incredibly long and also a little embarrassing. I was out of spell slots in a party with 3 casters, and we were all also stuck outside of this door, except for Gale, who was somehow stuck inside the door, and none of the tieflings had any weapons, and it was all just really unfortunate.
With glee.
Plus, it didn't even end up mattering. Halsin was still nowhere to be found afterwards. Oh well, let's see if he's here after a long rest. Okay, I don't see him on the map, but I'll still do a lap around the grove and see if there's anything out of place. But besides the dead bodies dotting the landscape, everything seemed normal enough. Although I did set off some sort of curse down by the druid circle. Oops. Anyways, the quest log still says that we're supposed to meet Halsin at the grove, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I decided to make a save and then try and go back to the goblin camp to see if he was still there. And in the process, I made a lot of goblins very angry, and I became very sad once more. Especially since at the end of my struggles, Halsin wasn't even at the goblin camp anymore. But forget Halsin, he's yesterday's news. You know who is loyal? Bolo. Because despite never having interacted with him at all during this playthrough, he still showed up at my camp after this.
Yes, my friend? I was just settling in and reviewing my latest findings. Mind flayers, cultists, and, of course, your esteemed company. Volothemp Gedar, realm-renowned author, auteur, and tastemaker at your service. Once I've written you into one of my books, there won't be a tavern in Faerun you can enter without receiving a hero's welcome. Finding is my job, my friend. If there's anything in the world worth knowing, I assure you, I do.
Anyways, it kind of sucks that not only did Halsin not show up at the grove to help, it seems he is now permanently lost, so you should probably not try this on an honor run or really ever. However, if you do find yourself in this position, I did do a little trial and error and realized you can get Halsin to meet you at the camp if the druids successfully seal off the grove. Basically, I went back a save and had everyone jump ship and abandon the Tieflings. Then I ran far enough off the map that I was no longer in the red zone, and I waited for the slaughter to be over.
Looks like the ritual worked.
Afterwards, I ran over back in time to see these thorns growing everywhere like they're keeping Sleeping Beauty herself inside that grove. And I have to admit, the ritual of thorns sucks, but it is kind of pretty. Now let's go take a long rest and, oh, hello, Halsin.
My apologies for showing up unannounced. I owe you a debt for seeing to the goblins' leaders. Now I'm here to pay that debt. I wish to come with you, help solve this problem that's plaguing you. It's the least I can do.
Alright, from here on out, everything is pretty normal, so that's where we're going to conclude today's episode. Thanks so much for watching, and please continue leaving your tips and suggestions in the comments below. I really appreciate that. Also, sorry that this video was like 40 minutes long. I really did try to keep it shorter, I swear, but somehow I ended up with 9 hours of footage, and I didn't even get to show you all the experiments I did with the Shadow Druids. Alas, another time. Until then, have a safe and happy week, and please enjoy this fun fact. Okay, love you all, bye.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love for the fake.